Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowden, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. We're going to be exploring a theme that often goes unnoticed, but quietly powers the entire modern localization engine, middleware. So I'm thrilled to be joined by you, Istvan, here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself in the process?
So my name is Istvan Lengyel, as you correctly pronounce it. I'm Hungarian living in Spain. So I'm actually calling in from Spain at this time. And I'm the founder and CEO of BeLazy, which is a middleware solution. And like many of you know me from before when I was in the TMS space, as I was also co-founder of MemoQ. And the thing is that over time, there was a big change in the thinking. And I think that this is going to be very relevant because right now this is the podcast of a TMS provider working with a middleware. So super interesting.
Let's dive right in. Middleware matters, and I want to talk a little bit how integration strategies shape the future in localization nowadays. Why do you think middleware has been overlooked for so long in localization tech conversations?
So in 2010, I changed to a Mac. I just want to bring up this analogy because that was very nice. I love to work with the Mac because it has everything in one place, and it was well put together, so nothing was really failing. And I think that is how we can look at TMSs. And the Mac works if you are in a monosystemic approach. The Mac has its own problems, it has its own benefits. And what happened is that over time, pieces were coming up, and right now I'm actually on a PC, so I moved back about 6 or 7 years ago, simply because you're able to replace parts. You don't have to live with its problems forever. For example, with the Mac, if you go down on volume on the hard drive, and it is not able to use up the space in order to use it as a memory, it's slowing down big time. And the thing is that right now, middleware it has been overlooked because in localization technology, people were looking for the one system to use. And I think that it's becoming more relevant because these days, it's not so much the one system.
How do you find that role of middleware in the context of agile localization? Can you define that for us a little bit?
Definitely. I mean, agile localization happens independently from software. It is use case based. And what has changed over the last couple of years is that now I don't think that there is any single player in the localization industry, enterprise, LSP, translator, that can decide about all the systems they need to use. Because the customers, everyone has customers and they are using different systems that you need to connect to, that you need to integrate. Previously, this was not really a problem. Because previously what happened is that if you didn't integrate, you worked this around with manual work. But what's changing now is with AI, speed is becoming much more important. And we cannot really overlook this feature of the times. So how I see middleware working now is that we are solving use cases rather than we are working with distinct technologies. And that's what middleware is about. Tidying up a bit the brains.
What makes a good middleware? Why do you think Crowden is particularly effective as a middleware solution?
I was surprised to find that Crowden is a middleware. So when we started working with Crowden, it was very, very interesting to find how many different connectors Crowden has built. It's got an immense collection. And it's middleware. It has a unified representation. So it's got a unified framework. So you can trust that it's going to work, and you can trust that somebody thought about the localization aspect of those systems. So the point is, it's not just logos, but also the localization aspect of it. I don't think that middleware or Crowden is the only way to solve the problems that different localization departments have, but it's a good way. Especially, it's a good way to learn.
What problem does BeLazy solve in the integration puzzle between content platforms and TMSs?
I mean, there is always one thing which is always there because we are working with people. And people often forget that they are working with people and that they are working with emails and everything. So there is business management. And TMSs all have certain aspects of business management reports. But the point is that for many organizations, they are not enough because they are working according to very specific rules with their vendors, and it's humans, so it's like not fully automated. And basically, BeLazy's place at the moment in the orchestration of the grand scheme of orchestration, if you like, the business management component. So that's what we are like, the dashboarding, the reporting across different platforms, understanding, who worked on what was the quality, what was the cost, things like that the different systems support, but they are not supporting them in a uniform way.
What do you think makes a good middleware solution invisible but indispensable? What are the key things there that we should highlight, you think?
I think that there are three main aspects of a middleware. Scalability. Middleware is meant for production. So it's not meant for experimentation. It is meant for a production degree. Error handling is also very important because in the production environment, not everything is going to be perfect. And finally, the unified configuration. It's like if you have a good middleware, you don't need to learn every single system that you need to connect with. A good middleware does the majority of the thinking for you. So there are different ways of integrations. There is also the point-to-point. But like, for example, what we do is like we spend 40% of our budget on planning the solutions, on investigating the possible ways. And I would imagine that crowding CMS connector budget also went like on a high percentage of that budget went on understanding the use cases and making sure that those systems can have like a localization that were not meant for localization in the first place.
Yeah, much of the focus is on making these solutions low code or no code centered. How do you think middleware changes the conversation from workflow design to maybe ecosystem orchestration?
I mean, there is workflow design, but the point is that in reality, the workflows are not perfect. So there are two orchestration approaches that one can take. There is the point-to-point, which is like you have an API, I have an API, and we are going to be connecting according to the functionality of your tool and according to the functionality of my tool. And the other is the middleware, where basically we're talking about use cases. It is not about a connection. It is about abstraction to achieve a certain goal. Like when you are, for example, localization manager, it really doesn't matter to you how people are using MailChimp, for example, for sending emails versus how they are using Optimizely. What you would like to do is make sure that the translatable text can be extracted. The customers are able to order that. They don't need to copy paste everything. And then it can go back into the right place. And what is the right place? Probably in MailChimp, you would duplicate a mail shot, whereas in Optimizely, there is localization. So it's the abstraction. Point-to-point is very flexible. The middleware is somewhat less flexible, but the point is that middleware can also be further complemented with point-to-point integrations because it can have an API and it can make point-to-point easier. So for example, this is what we are doing. Most of our customers are using BeLazy together with the point-to-point orchestration because what they can achieve like that is things like, I want the deadline that the customer sent to be updated to the last working hour of the last working day. We don't have a feature for this, but it's very easy to do with APIs. Also, a middleware is not clearly about APIs. So there is like another thing which I find important is, for example, in a web-based system, you can create an extension. So like, let's say you are working in a CMS and you want to order directly from the CMS. A middleware can do this. This is not going to be a point-to-point orchestration. We at BeLazy, for example, we built also a Chrome extension so that in the systems you are using, you can all, like from where you are able to do certain actions with those projects within BeLazy without opening its user interface. These are convenience things that middleware can do. And middleware can also not only use APIs, we can go into reverse engineering, web scraping, like all of these different things that appear in the world.
Yeah. What are the business implications of investing in integration versus reinventing your whole end-to-end system?
Whew, that's a big question. That's a big question. I mean, there are like reinventing, I think it has like a couple of problems. Migration. So you reinvented an end-to-end system, the users need to migrate. You need to think about the migration. And for example, this is one thing that there is no technology for at the moment in our industry. The second thing is the completeness, which is like of what I want to do, how much a certain system is capable of doing. And the third one is the scope of the system. I mean, if you had end-to-end systems, for example, I mean, you would build a localization solution into a CMS, or you would build a CMS into a localization solution. Neither exists at the moment, with the exception of Gridley, maybe. But like integration removes these problems because these are things that are like defining yourself in comparison to other players. But with integration, you don't need to do this. Integration is always about a business. It's always a business problem. So investing into it is like many people ask me, is it possible to integrate A and B? And the answer is yes. It's like there is no question that there exists a technology that allows the integration of A and B. The question is how much it costs. Who do you have to talk to? It's always possible. It's not a technical problem. And what we found is that most of the industry is talking about return on investment. But in integration, you also need to talk about the total cost of ownership of technology, because that is what's increasing. You need to pay for an API now, or is there another way of achieving what you want? And like what we are seeing is that this is a very big factor in deciding if somebody is going to do like middleware and integrations, or somebody is like investing into single solutions.
Yeah, it seems to me that integrations are becoming more and more important. Could middleware eventually become the primary decision-making layer in localization, you think?
I mean, I think decision making is always around reporting and outlier handling. You need to have good data and you need to have good reports. The point is, what's a good report? One that tells something about your business. I mean, where middleware is very useful is that it unifies information in its structure coming from various systems. For example, let's say we have to unify, for example, match rates. We have to unify language codes. We have to normalize the data. Like, for example, converting approximately words, characters, hours, when it is a translation, when it is a review. If somebody calls it review or revision, these kind of things can be normalized. And then you get much better data for reporting, which means that you are going to get better decision making. Middleware is also like a single source of truth because it is monitoring various systems. So it knows when the system is down. It knows what the system is sending. And TMSs, as we could see, like they are very often very captive of their data. I mean, there are some TMSs that allow business intelligence and data lakes and everything, but it's like it's not really used. And maybe it's around the licensing, I'm not sure, but like not a lot of companies are making the best use of their data from TMSs. And an orchestration layer can make the data more available so that it can be ingested into business intelligence and merged with data coming from other areas according to the business goals. So what I think is that middleware will not become the primary decision-making layer, but it's going to be the primary source of information.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the democratization of AI over the last couple of years, and I think what we're talking about here this morning is a little bit about the democratization of localization tech. It seems like you've described Crowden as the only entry-level, non-exploitative CMS integration solution. What do you think makes it different?
I mean, yes. And the reason is that, CMS integration used to be like super expensive. And like you're asking some of the TMS providers, like, how am I trying this or that? And like, you get a budget of 20,000 euros a year. Now, the point is that if you want to democratize, like small LSPs or even small localization departments don't have that budget. They are not able to do it. And the point is that if you don't try something, you will not understand like what is it missing. You will be just speaking about it like many people do these days about AI, but that's just a side note. So what I find with crowding is that it's got a very nice business model, because even in the entry level package, and I'm not trying to sell crowding right now, but it's
You're
the
doing
point
a
is
good
that
job. We're letting you go ahead.
yeah, even in the entry level package, I mean, you have like a lot of integrations, and you can pick one and you can use one, and then you learn how you can actually work with CMS integrations, and then you are seeing the entire process go through automatically. So what I'm finding is that the fact that the price tag in crowding is like so attractive for integration, I think that's what makes it like an entry level CMS integration solution. If every integration is the best or not, I can't tell you that, because I did not try all of them. I tried a couple, but not all of them. But in order to learn whether it's the right thing or not the right thing, when you can go to crowding and you can just try it.
Yeah, that makes it really, really nimble. Are there any dangers of entry level tools being too limited to grow along with the size of your business?
I like to talk these days about tech stacks rather than tools or tool sets. There was something very interesting that happened to me last week. So I was in a call with a customer, and this customer's customer is using Contentful. Contentful is one of these systems that is like super easy in theory, super easy to integrate because it's got APIs, REST APIs. But the point is that it's got such a flexible data representation that it becomes one of the connectors that you definitely need to try whether it works for you. I've heard from many companies that they didn't find any. I've heard from other people that there was like, one TMS that had a great contentful connector, and that's what actually sold the entire TMS. But what was interesting is that we are working not only with crowding, but with AI Lengyel, which is another uh, actually technology provider from the Ukraine. And AI Lengyel are doing also fine CMS integrations. They are very much focused on a couple, and they also have a contentful one. So before telling the customer, they wanted to use make.com to actually take out content from Contentful. And I was like, that's probably not going to work. And then they explained to me that in crowding, like they are working with tags. And in crowding, they are not able to change the tags when delivering. In iLangel, they would need the customer to work with them on the setup because it needs some installation on their end, which would take days for the customer, and they didn't want the customer to do that. And basically, the simplest approach worked. So, where I think with entry level tools being too limited to grow, I mean, it's not really a problem. What I think is we need to see is like, how are we building our tech stack? Because you can use 3 integrations from crowding for a CMS, and you can use 2 others from anywhere else. It's not that you need to be stuck with one if you have that like the right tool set and the right orchestration in place.
Yeah. How can startup or smaller LSPs leverage platforms like Crowd and BeLazy to compete with the bigger players, you think?
I think that there is like a holy grail, which is like much more a holy grail for me, I think, than it's for the majority of the people. So I've always been like super excited about end-to-end no-touch processes. And the thing is that like what we built together with Crowded, together with companies like Plunet, Protemus, or XTRF, is an end-to-end process of CMS integration, which is coming from Crowdin into Crowdin. BeLazy picks it up and generates the tasks, and then it's going to be going into a business management system, such as Plunet, for example, and then the XLIF is processed there with their own integrations if they need that, and the whole thing is going back. And this is actually happening without anybody touching anything. So what I think is that for a smaller LSP to understand that they are in the same league with the Lion Bridges and the relocalizers in the world, that's a big revelation. And it is something that, gives them like a lot of like trust in themselves. And this is, I think, how they can learn how to compete, because they are like then in the same automation game as the big ones.
Yeah, what seems to be super interesting for me is the sense of control that maybe smaller organizations didn't have in the past. Where does BeLazy fit into this democratization narrative?
Everybody has this natural need to have one system to monitor all the work and see all the work in there. And like this one system does not really exist at the moment. But like where we are building BeLazy is to turn it into a project centralization platform, which is like putting a single pipeline. And if you want, you can use it with any TMS, we can any BMS, and like have one overview, like one dashboard for all the work that goes through, no matter if it is human translated or machine translated or AI improved, and make it pluggable for all those steps, for all those use cases where you should be able to plug in some good technologies that exist out there. And this is our democratization narrative, that you are not bound to one system. And here is like, even if crowding is, for example, great, it may not be great for everything in the world. And like what we are trying to do is help people to solve that problem. And if crowding is not great, maybe they can learn from it and they are going to improve that, and maybe it's going to be great again.
Yeah, they make a lot of adjustments. So somehow I feel like Groudon is a really great company because of that as well, that they make a lot of adaptations and they're continuously improving. Since you're touching upon these integrations with different systems network, can you maybe give us a little example and a use case of how you would integrate Groudon with BeLazy and something like Plunet, for example?
I mean, this is basically the metadata-based integration that I mentioned. So at BeLazy, we believe that the only way of describing projects is with metadata, with flexible metadata. And all the different tools have metadata, like Crowdin has metadata and other TMSs also offer metadata. They are not the same. But the point is that CMSs can also offer metadata. So what we are saying is an exception-based project management that, by default, this should go through like this or that workflow, let's say. But if this metadata is like this or contains the word that, then you are going to go into a different workflow. And this is what we are doing. So like with Crowdin, for example, we can extract the XLIF, but people can also work in Crowdin and simply assign the translators there. We are picking this up and creating a project in Plunet based on the Crowdin task. What's super important is that we are also bundling the projects together. So like a Crowdin task is, for example, into one language at a time. But what you would like to have in, let's say, Plunet, is you would like to have a multilingual project. That's what BeLazy is adding there, that we are creating new items for each task. And it's like very flexible here. And then in Plunet, you might have a memo queue integration, let's say, which is like taking the XLIF that was generated by Crowdin and translating it with the same translators that you've always used. And the whole thing is going back from memo queue into Plunet. That's their integration here. And then BeLazy picks it up. BeLazy is uploading that into Crowdin as an XLIF. Crowdin is updating the XLIF, and it's then updating the CMS with the translations. And this is actually sounding like, probably this sounds like really complex. But what we find is that with good engineering, this is pretty solid. So it's not failing like more often than a single tool would fail in a situation like this.
Yeah, once you corner the networking, I assume it's pretty smooth sailing. However, with a network model, I was just thinking, what becomes the source of truth and how do you maintain it? There's a lot of layers to it. Which one has priority?
That's a very good one. I mean, it is obviously, one can say that, we are the source of truth. And I think that any middleware that is like seeing a lot of different systems at work and like seeing everything that's happening there can be a source of truth. The problem is that with every software, you can have issues. And we are in a small enough industry that, what we've seen is that even the best APIs are not perfect. We've seen that even the best software is making mistakes. So like what is happening is very similar to what happens, for example, between a multilingual vendor and a single language vendor, that you've got a list here, you've got a list there, and you are trying to intercom the two lists to see whether like that source of truth was really telling the truth. So I think that that's for now the only way. You can also automate that. So actually, I am very much a firm believer in the business intelligence tools. So I love tools like Tableau, and that can simply do this. So it can take two sources of truth, and it can really tell like, are they corresponding to each other or not?
We haven't really talked about AI for the last 25 minutes, believe it or not. That's amazing nowadays, but let's touch on it for a second, nevertheless.
We are
How
still
can
alive.
how can AI support the coordination of these decentralized localization nodes? And can AI be used beyond just the translation box, in your opinion, as well? Because you talked about business intelligence, and I think there's an opportunity there to leverage AI in a completely different way in localization. Often we've remained in the localization box. Maybe this type of technology allows to use AI a little bit beyond that. What do you think?
I would say so. I mean, it's like AI depends on good data, and like localization, besides the language box, is actually something where we are missing good data, unfortunately, because the practices are not amazing. Like there's a lot of like patching and fixing, which is not described in data. So it remains to be seen whether AI can support really the coordination of localization nodes decentralized. But it is good at analyzing large amounts of well-configured data. I hope that at one point, through automation, through like rules, we are going to get there, and then it's going to become like useful. Right now, for example, I mean, what we are doing is that there is one module in BeLazy which is called the email assistant, and it's reading the emails and it's trying to extract all the relevant information for project management from the emails. And for this, we are actually using AI, and we are even looking at like using agentic AI here for like even automating the answering and like that way the most common project intake source, the email, can be like fully automated as if it were like a CMS connector. So there are certain areas I think where we can go, but at the moment I don't see like, I click a button and it's going to manage my project perfectly well, or if I don't even click a button. And I must say that I've tried a couple of like these AI supported like workflow designers as well, like in make.com. I wasn't so impressed.
Yeah. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some work in that sense. What's the most promising use case for AI and middleware that you know of nowadays, not just in translation, but in orchestration?
In orchestration, I mean, last week I looked at a tool. I've never heard about this before. Like we know a lot about the different tools that are like connecting systems. Like Zapier is the is the most famous example of that. And like, but also in the industry we have like Blackbird, for example. We've got also like make.com, which we use a lot. Run My Process. So there is like plenty of these, and N8N is also used a lot. And and I was looking at a tool which is called Versori. Never heard that before. And basically, it is AI that was trained on API descriptions. And the thing is that I just entered like create a automation that is going to like pull a opportunity in BeLazy and create that as a project in create as import it into a project in Crowdin and create a task there. And like it first told me that like I don't know where is the API of BeLazy. Tell me that. Crowdin is very well known. It also told me that, and I can use the API of that. And then I entered the URL. It was thinking for another, I would say, 10-15 minutes. And in the end, it threw out like a flow chart. It threw out certain calls, and like I did not try it, but I looked at it and it was like impressive. So there is definitely something that can happen there. I was very impressed, but we still need to see like whether it really works or it just impressed me.
Ishvan, we could probably go a half an hour more very easily. Want to ask you one last question in parting, because we're coming to the end of this podcast, unfortunately. How might BeLazy and Crowden evolve into a predictive and adaptive routing feature combo? And what would your ideal middleware be for the future? That's it's a two-faced question.
It's a complex one. I mean, what I think is that crowding is one of those companies that is like investing a lot into experimenting with like realistic AI. So like AI that is actually in code rather than on PowerPoints. And like for us, it's three things. So it's on the one hand, it's a TMS. We work with many other TMSs. So that part is like, business as usual. It's got the CMS starting point, which is somewhere where I believe that, the AI capabilities can be probably used in order to identify the text to be extracted and identify what is the best way to put it back, to understand the structure. And finally, it's also like a great AI powerhouse. The way I see it is that there are different aspects of middleware that can come in order to create like a fully flexible way of technology stack. And one thing that I find is that it's a good idea to stick with what you know best. And the way the different areas are is that there is like the CMS based content extraction, which is not only CMSs, there is like task management systems and also other things. So it's not all tasks are coming from there, which is one area. Here, for example, crowding has like a lot of power already. Then what we are doing is the project flow automation and harmonization between the different tools. And then there is another really important aspect, which is what we call modality at BeLazy. Modality is basically whether you're using a human translator, whether you are using machine translation, whether you are using an LLM, which is also built on data. So there is the flow, the modality, and the data. And within the flow, there is the CMS type of flow, and there is the project type of flow. Whereas with the modality, it's like you can do a lot of things. And if you are talking about human translations, then the vendor management is probably the most important thing. If you're talking about like machine translation quality estimation and like automated post editing, then it's a different competency that people need to do. So I'm actually looking there, and you've got also like tools like Intento and Custom MT and Eden AI that are middleware around AI. And I think with like sorting out these areas, these three areas, you can actually come to a situation where you can mix and match the best technologies. So basically you are not bound to any technology. You are able to take out the parts and then put in the right parts so that the whole process is going to be flawless. I think that's a good last word, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think that you're really making us dream of the flexibility this brings along. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us today, Istvan. And I can't wait to talk to you again and maybe meet you again at one of the conferences coming up here in the localization industry. Thank you so very much. Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowden. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit crowden.com. See you next time.